Welcome to Inside the Game on the National Soccer Network. Now, here are your hosts, Jonathan Turner and Nathan Wangler.
Good morning. Live here on the National Soccer Network, Inside the Game. Jonathan alongside Nathan Wangler. It is episode number 114. It is Monday, July the 7th. The holiday weekend has come to an end. We are back here at it again here on a Monday morning, and a little new look and feel to the show this morning. We decided to go a little more professional. We did. That included a little more professional here, Mr. Nathan Wangler. So, yeah, you see on the left-hand side of your screen there, you see our rundown. That is what we're going to be talking about here today, and presented by Salt Athletic. We'll talk about them here in the coming days, weeks, and months. But, yeah, so today, what are we going to talk about? Well, we're going to recap the weekend. We'll talk about that. We'll get into that. Hey, an injury yesterday taking place in Seattle. We'll get into that in regards to Stephen Frey and what happened there. We'll talk the USLW playoffs. That happened all weekend long. And the Gold Cup final, which I know a lot of people want to hear more about and talk about. A lot happening yesterday in regards to that. So we'll touch base on that today. But the first thing that I want to do here this morning, and obviously we talk about the recap and get into this, is we want to hearts and prayers going out to everybody in the state of Texas right now. Talk about getting bombarded, with, natural disasters, water. Just really crazy. And to hear what's been going on in regards to that with the loss of life. I wanted to start off the show by obviously saying, hey, our thoughts and prayers and our sympathies are with those who have been affected and impacted, the lives that have been lost. Intense thunderstorms fed in part by remnant moisture from Tropical Storm Barry stalled over central Texas this weekend on Thursday, and 12 inches of rainfall in just an hour. Think about that. That's a lot of rain. So flash flooding. And so it is a lot. They're saying total confirmed fatalities 80 to 83, with around 28 children among the dead. And they're saying 41 people are still unaccounted for right now. You go to bed, you expect to wake up the next morning. And if you don't expect to be woken up by surging water coming through your house. So we do obviously want to say our thoughts and prayers with those affected and impacted by this in Texas.
Yeah, and even when you live in an area of the country where you have an understanding that something like this may happen, you don't expect it quite to that extent. And I think the worst part about it is the kids. Obviously loss of death anywhere is sad and it's shocking. And I think when we talk about what happened in Texas and how sudden it was, and especially during a time of the year where, we're supposed to be celebrating each other, we're supposed to be spending time with family and, really unwinding and enjoying the life that we have here, to have a natural disaster like that strike the way that it did. It's disheartening. It's sad. And, I had a few conversations yesterday about what all that looked like down in Texas. And, obviously we want to thank the heroic people that have made all the efforts in the world to save people. But yeah, there's still individuals that are unaccounted for. There's a lot of confusion. There's a lot of sadness. So yeah, I think it's never easy. And, to be frank with you, it doesn't get any easier talking about people who are passing away way too early on this show. Cause we just got done talking about Diogo Jota. And now we're talking about this disaster in Texas. So yeah, thoughts and prayers and everything to the families, in that area. Obviously, life's cruel. Life is cruel and unusual sometimes, and nobody really deserves that. So, yeah, and a big thank you, obviously, to the first responders that are doing everything they can to pick up the pieces ever since.
Yeah, and I think that it's unfortunate that every time these things happen, whether it be a natural disaster, violent, whatever it might be. The thing that the media tends to do is they tend to move it around like some kind of a political football, and I don't subscribe to that. There's a time and a place to evaluate. There's a time and a place to ask questions. Right, wrong, or indifferent, there's a time. Right now is not that time. Now, you could be behind the scenes. Absolutely, those involved in all of this could absolutely be involved in dissecting and Monday morning quarterbacking what went right and what went wrong, right? That's fine. But for us in the media to start asking those questions and to be pointing fingers and blaming people is not – I'm just so sick and tired of that. That aspect of it. All it does is create animosity and anger. And right now, all we should be feeling is, sorrow and sadness and wanting to pull our loved ones closer, right? In these circumstances. So that's one thing I want to say about that. But it is a tragedy. Obviously, we'll continue to update based on what we hear and talk about it. But it's terrible because these kids going to a summer camp to go spend time with friends and have a good time and for that to be disrupted in this way and ultimately losing your life over it is terrible. What else happened this weekend? We had a lot of games here on the network. We talked about it on Friday. We didn't talk about it a lot on Friday, but I'm going to talk about it now. We didn't have a show Friday, so that's probably why
we talked about it, just not on the show.
Just not on the show. And then on Thursday, our contract with the USLW took place, and that contract was us producing the USLW playoffs. And so to put this in perspective, all 12 of the playoff matches this weekend were 100% produced by us. And what that means is that, we were in charge of distribution to Sports Engine Play, and then we handled all the feeds. And some of those feeds obviously we were involved in the graphics and the commentary, and other ones we were the straight, hey, we ingested it and then we dealt with it and handled the process of getting it out to where it needed to go. And so, which is a really, really cool thing for us to be able to be a part of. We did do the Goal Zone this weekend, which is when there's simultaneous games happening, you can put them on the screen and show everybody what's happening. So someone can just come and watch all the games at one time and not have to go to like game to game to game, which can be somewhat annoying. It's like NFL Red Zone, but our own version of it. And we were able to pull that off. And last night, Gabe, who's one of our commentators, literally sat from 6:30 till I think 10:45. Just sat there in the Goal Zone and commentated on the Goal Zone and just kept people involved and engaged in that environment. It was super cool for him to be able to do that. Having, 3 games happening at once and being able to see those scores.
In studio?
Happen. Nope. He was, he was in his house. He doesn't live here in Michigan. I think he lives in Texas. So
is his last name Schrey by chance?
It is not.
Oh, okay. All right.
No.
Right.
But I know who you're talking about, but no. So yeah, he did that last night. We had a UPSL conference championship last night, Midwest Central, Chicago Nation versus KS Wisloka. Chicago Nation winning in that game, moving on to the national playoffs. And so that's what we were able to cover last night in Chicago. Peter, who's in our chat, was actually our camera operator last night for that game. And apologies because our crew did not realize that the UPSL YouTube channel did not go live right away. The game fully was available on our Roku channel, but it was not available on YouTube right away. And so I do apologize for that. But we did have the game. It was live on our platform. But there was a snafu in there in that regard. But anyways, so yeah. So I know we're out of town. I mean, you joined me on Thursday, Nathan, for our broadcast. That was Friday morning. Joined me Friday morning for the broadcast on July the 4th of July. But then after that, you headed back west and north and had some time with friends and family. So what was your weekend like?
Yeah, back. Well, you're right. I did do that one playoff game with you. Yeah, Detroit City FC falling short in that one. Exciting matchup, though. I mean, came down towards the end. They were almost able to tie it up multiple times. I thought they were, once they were down 2-0 in the first half against FC Hammer, I thought maybe they were buried and done in that matchup, but they weren't. I mean, they fought back into it, so that was really exciting. Obviously, you and I had the opportunity to preview everything that was going to go down this weekend, and there's something that I love about this show, and that's with it being Monday through Friday. It's right in that sweet spot because it gives you a lot of times the weekend to just kind of consume what's going on and then come back and recap it. And I know we're going to talk about a lot of different things here today that happened over the course of that weekend, but I was paying attention, although I was not on the mic for those playoff games this weekend. But yeah, went back home after that matchup and then went down to South Bend the following day. Went to see a couple of really close friends that live down that direction, and so was there. And then yesterday went to the Cubs game. Went into Chicago, so that's where I got this thing. But took the train in, and then took the subway to Addison. And that's one of the ways you can go into Chicago without having to drive, which honestly sometimes is a better deal since they had racing. They had a bunch of other stuff going. I think the last time we went, it was the Democratic National Convention. So I wasn't going to be caught dead driving into Chicago. So maybe the train would be the more efficient way. What's up, guys? Welcome in of going about that. So all in all, it was good. The game got delayed, but they ended up winning. I think it was 11-0 at the end of the day. So yeah, but anytime you get to go there, anytime you get to be in that environment, the thing is about Chicago is it's always it's a cultural experience, and with it being, it's a national landmark. I mean, over the hundreds and hundreds of years, there's been a lot of people that have been inside that building, a lot of legends that have played there. And the benefit of being a really good team is it really doesn't matter what day you're playing on. It's always going to sell out. It's always going to be exciting. You could say the same thing about the Tigers right now. I mean, it's just it's a party at the park, when they're playing well. So it was good to be able to experience that. I'm able to justify maybe 1 or 2 professional games a year just simply because of the price points, especially at Wrigley. I mean, you're blowing pretty much an entire paycheck on one day of going to one game, but it is what it is. It's all for the experience. So I enjoyed it. Obviously disappointed with some of the soccer news that I was following during the course of that game, but we'll talk on that coming up. But yeah, all in all, not a bad little stretch. Good to get away at least for a couple of days.
Yeah, and I had a chance yesterday to kind of take a breather. We had games on Thursday and Friday, 4th of July, and then on Saturday we didn't have our typical 30 or 40 broadcasts that we've been having over the last month and a half. We only had, I think, 9 games in total on Saturday. And so a lot of those games I didn't have anything to do with, which was great. And so, and then we had our games yesterday. I think we had 7 broadcasts yesterday. But they didn't start until like later in the day. So I got a chance to kind of just hang out and relax. Yesterday we had a chance to go have a nice brunch in the morning and be able to get ready to do this again. What I will say is that the family and I were planning on going today to go out to the west side of the state and to go to the beach. We're a beach family. All right. I'm someone that when I say I like to go on the beach, I love going to the beach when it's 100 degrees outside and it like forces you to have to want to go in the water. Right. And when I mean that, it's like otherwise, you go to the beach. It's not it's like today, it's supposed to be 75 degrees here in Michigan. And it's not a day that I want to go to the beach. Okay, because I'm not going to be so hot that I need to go cool off.
I'm a fish. I can't relate. I'm going to jump in regardless.
Oh, wow, that's fair. But, okay, we're also 28. When you get to 40, maybe different, right? So true. I want to get, I want to get my nice umbrella up under my nice chair and sit down, relax in the sand, and just relax. And then it gets really hot, go to the water, right? That's kind of how I want it to be. So today wasn't going to work out. So we're going to go to the beach tomorrow. It's going to be 85 again tomorrow. Nice. I think we're going to head to Caseville, which is north of here. So I think I'll drive into the studio tomorrow morning, do my show. Family will drive in. Then we'll head up to Caseville, spend the afternoon, the whole day in Caseville, then come home tomorrow night. So something that we do, on occasion. And so we're looking forward to doing that. But I want to dive into the Stephen Frey injury. If you didn't know, Stephen Frey, not Stephen. Stephen Frey injury, goalkeeper for the Seattle Sounders. Okay. And the reason I want to talk about this, first off, it's a very scary thing that can happen to a goalkeeper, myself included. I've experienced similar kind of injuries. What we're not going to do is I'm not going to put this on the screen. And for numbers of reasons. One is I'm just tired of being blocked for putting stuff on the screen. I get getting blocked for doing it, so you're gonna have to go watch it yourself. But in the waning moments of this game, the last few moments of this game against the Columbus Crew yesterday, Stephen Frake, ball comes in on a free kick, and he goes to clear it out off the 6-yard line, and he dives out head first with his hands, and he takes a knee to the head. And immediately goes down. You can tell. Players can tell. So I believe he was knocked unconscious. But he was ultimately carted off the field in an ambulance and taken to the hospital. By all accounts, he's okay. Right. So it was just a scary moment, right? We see this in football all the time, not necessarily as much in soccer, but we see it a lot in football where a player goes down and there's a lot of abundance of precaution. They do a whole bunch of things. And then we find out that the player's fine, be okay, whatever the case might be. But during the game, the head coach for Seattle, and I always sometimes draw a blank. And I thought, Brian Schmetzer confirmed that Ferz Alert moving his fingers. He was okay. But during the game, during the broadcast, you actually hear the coach, Brian. You can actually hear him like yelling to the officials, like this game should be over, or like end this game. And so there's this moment of time that's taking place. And, when is the right time to end a game? We saw it a couple of years back. When in the Buffalo Bills situation, right, where a player is under cardiac arrest, right? And we all remember that moment. And they ended up ending the game, right? They stopped the game. It was probably one of the first times, I think, in the NFL history the game came to an end. It didn't complete. Right? I think,
yeah,
under those circumstances.
Right.
So it begs to the question, or lends to the question of this: especially how late it was in the game, is this something where the game should come to an end? Because you think about this, right? You're talking 20 or 30 minutes of delayed time. It's 1-1. Should the game end?
And I remember Skip Bayless, Mr. No Feel himself, immediately after you're referring to Damar Hamlin and what happened there. Immediately, on X asked the question of, okay, well, what happens? Where do we go from here? The game wasn't over. But people got on him pretty quick because they're like, well, your concern rests in the state of the game and what the outcome is. Your concern does not rest with what happened to Damar Hamlin. Now, the way I read that, his timing was terrible. And this is why we say timing is everything, even in broadcasting, right? Like it's not necessarily what you say sometimes, it's when you say it and it's how you say it. But it can also very much be, it's all timing related, and it's about having a feel and it's about knowing where that line is. And I think Skip in that moment, he made a grave mistake because he assumed that it was the right time to say something like that. It wasn't the right time. We were all so emotionally charged in watching that take place, and, the medical personnel giving him CPR on the field and everything else that led into that then and there was not the time to ask that question. The time to ask that question was when we got further on down the line and we found out that he was okay and that everything was going to be okay. And, there's a way of making this up or finishing this off. You can always make other plans to finish off that game. You can always make other plans to be able to complete it. The issue in that case is that, you have to look at the players themselves. Are they emotionally capable of continuing to play that game? That's where my thing comes into play, because in that situation,
time. So this took place in stoppage time,
right?
In the 8th minute.
So you're so far down the line, right? To your point. So maybe in that situation, you do allow it to play out. I think there is some of that comes into play. Especially if it's if it's a 1-1 tie, then I guess, it ends in a draw, right? Because it's regular season. They wouldn't go into added time or anything.
Correct.
So that in and of itself, I think in that situation, maybe you allow it to play out. But I think there is a situation where you have to look at, is there a consensus on the field when it comes to players and coaches as to whether or not we should continue this game? I know it wasn't on the same level, but I do recall doing a game for you guys. And I believe it was at the Michigan Stars complex. Now, I can't remember what teams were playing. I think it was a UPSL matchup.
Michigan Stars versus Liquid Football.
Liquid Football. Okay. All right. Thank you. And there was a player that went crashing into the wall, and they, stretcher, ER, everything, they decided to call it. And I think in that scenario, I think the players and maybe the coach all kind of came together and decided, hey, maybe this is the right thing to do because of everything that's going on, and maybe the emotional state of our players right now does not support us moving forward with this game. I think there is nuance. I think there's gray area there. I think in this particular situation, maybe you let it finish out, but it's scary, man, because you don't know in that moment, right? Until they get Stefan back and in, medical help and they actually get him looked at, you don't know. And so I think in that situation, maybe you let it play out, but then again, there's a lot of different people that have opinions on that.
Yeah, no, I would agree. And again, the question is, and the question where, obviously, if you're just joining us, Stephen Frey, Seattle Sounders goalkeeper, been a cornerstone for this side for some time now. He went down yesterday with a head injury in the 8th minute of stoppage time, and they had to be taken off on a stretcher and taken to the hospital in an ambulance, and so Stefan is okay. And which is important, the most important part of this. But then the question becomes, should the game have come to an end? And eventually, 5 minutes after the injury, they ended up calling the game. They decided to end the game. So the game did not conclude. You would have had to finish everything out. Then there's going to be, whatever's left over. You could argue at that point, they might have only been 30 seconds left. So those people who are at home too realize this as well. So in that scenario, the referee, it's not like we're adding 30 minutes, right? So if there's a 30 minutes of stoppage, we're not going to be adding 30 minutes. Okay. What you do is what was left in the game at that moment. Mm-hmm. So if let's say it's a minute, all right, a minute's left, then you're just, when they come back into play, you're going to go with the minute, or you're not going to add 30 minutes. It's, the game's already in stoppage time. So whatever is the stop. Now, if you are in the 54th minute and there's, 30, was that 40? Yeah, there's 40 minutes left, whatever the heck it is. So like 36 minutes. So in that environment, you are going to, 36 minutes would be added, if you, so that's kind of like how that would look. Right. So, to kind of put things in perspective. But when you're in stoppage time, the time's already been allotted for. Now it's just, okay, well, we took 30 minutes to get to this point. We just need to get one more minute in. And so if they would have come back, for the remaining however many seconds. And so what's it worth, right? So, which is obviously the right call to play this game with 30 seconds in stoppage time doesn't, with what's going on, makes no sense. Again, right. The debate about whether or not this happens in the first half and whatever, these injuries happen all the time in first and second half, normal time. And so of course you're going to, run with it.
Right.
And so that which is a completely different story. But what's important is when you see injuries like this, you want to start asking questions about safety and things like that. And most importantly, how you handle them. How do you handle them? And I thought the injury was handled appropriately. It's now the question becomes, what took so long? Well, I know the coach is like, hey, this should be ending. But, the reality is that those decisions sometimes don't come from the referee. They come from an administrator who's talking in their ear. right? So
Yeah,
it's a
and that's the
completely
hard
different
thing.
story.
Yeah,
Yeah,
one phone call leads to another, which leads to another, which leads to conversations about everything that's going on. The governing body is going to be the one that ends up making the decision at the end of the day. So I think what we can take away from this is we're very happy that he was okay, that he didn't end up seriously getting hurt. I think if there was ever a question of whether or not the game of soccer is a physical contact sport, I think it really it should be settled. I mean, watching some of these things take place, it is a very physical, intense, fast-paced game, and you know this better than ever. Like, goaltenders are going to put themselves in the line of fire more than a lot of players on the pitch, and because of that, you have to be willing to, in a lot of ways, sacrifice body and mind to do so. And from all accounts and from what I've seen out of him, he's a very good goaltender, and he's someone that's going to put himself in those positions. And so for him to be okay that's the most important thing at the end of the day.
absolutely. Moving on now into USLW playoffs. 12 games happened this weekend. We talked about it here a little bit in the recap this morning, but let's dive into this playoff, the playoffs that happened here this weekend. And, we're going to start in the Eastern Conference. NC Courage, who won the whole thing last year, started off here on Friday. They mounted a comeback. Actually, I think it was actually Thursday. Now I think about it. Yeah, it was Thursday. They mounted a comeback following the undefeated regular season to advance to the final, where they took on Annapolis Blues, and who won against the Long Island Rough Riders 2-0. So the Eastern Conference Championship game was between North Carolina and Annapolis. We'll talk about who won that matchup in a little bit, but to start off, that's how that Eastern Conference kind of started to shape up. The Western Conference, based out in Stockton, California, Utah United beating FC Olympia. They did so in a late goal, which I was on the call for that game. It was a great, it was a fun game to call. Two teams. Utah United, I believe, it scored 60 goals this season, right? And so it was really, really a lot of firepower from Utah. And then you had Stockton Cargo beating SC Blue Heat, Santa Clarita Blue Heat, by a score of 2-1. So those two teams saw each other last night. Again, we'll talk about that Western Conference Championship in a moment. The Southern Conference, Asheville City beating TLH Reckoning by a score of 3-1. So pretty decisive win for them. And then Lone Star and Sporting Jacks, the only game that went into penalties this weekend, was this Lone Star versus Jacksonville matchup. Lone Star won that game in penalties 3-0 and moved on to take on Asheville City in the final last night. And so last night, what happened? Or yesterday, what happened? This is where it gets really fun. We'll go back to that Southern Conference for a second because this got really interesting. Asheville City was down 1-0 in the final moments of that game against Lone Star. They scored to send it in extra time, and then they scored in extra time to make it 2-1 and move on to a national semifinal. So they won that Southern Conference. They will actually host the I believe the national semifinal here this coming weekend, and they'll do it playing against against North Carolina Courage, who they won in penalties. And so it was 0-0 in that game. And the North Carolina advanced 4-3 on penalties to beat Annapolis Blues. And so they'll go on and they'll play Asheville City in the national semifinal here next weekend. In the Western Conference, Utah United beat Stockton Cargo, Stockton Cargo 2-0. And then yesterday, we saw Minnesota Aurora. I was on the call for that game in the Central Conference, beating Kings Hammer FC, right? And so Kings Hammer FC was, by all accounts, one of the best scoring teams in the league. They had averaging over 4 goals a game 38 goals on the season going into that game, and only allowed 10. Meanwhile, Minnesota Aurora had scored 28, only allowed 4 all season, and didn't allow any on Friday in their matchup against the Pittsburgh Riveters, and found a way yesterday in the 88th minute. The game was 0-0. Sage Wimes finds the back of the net, and they win that game and move on to a national semifinal. Well, they'll take on in that semifinal, they'll take on the Utah United. And they're hosting. So Minnesota Aurora will host. So your national semifinals are all set. And we'll take a look here at the bracket right there. There you see it. Again, Utah United will take on Minnesota Aurora. And then Asheville City will host North Carolina Courage for a chance for a national championship. So all those games can be found on Sport Engine Play and produced here by yours truly.
And I like sleepers personally. I mean, it's always nice once you get towards the end of the tournament to have teams that are underdogs, because you look at these 4, and specifically on the left side of your screen, the Western and Central matchup between Utah United and Minnesota Aurora. Minnesota Aurora has really been a favorite. It was a 4th straight year winning that division. I mean, that's a really, really strong side. And even you and I were talking about exactly what they bring to the table. Because you think about it, back during June, they were kind of hogging that top spot in terms of the USLW power rankings. And they were really high on Minnesota Aurora FC because they've built this expectation that they're going to be there. Obviously went, undefeated this year during the regular season. I mean, they really set the standard in terms of what they're able to do. And again, that's been 4 straight years, so this is number 5 that they've been in it. So it doesn't shock me at all. And that was something that you and we were going over the matchups on Thursday when this thing just got underway. And I'm like, hey, look out for Minnesota because they're a juggernaut in a lot of ways. But,
you said 5 straight years. I just want to make sure I heard.
I believe it is 5 now. They've 4 straight years winning the division, and so I think
they've been around since 2022. They formed in 2021, and no, it's good because I think that when it comes to like this specific team, we had a chance. Dan and I talked about last
4th year, not 5th year. My bad.
Yeah, so 4th year of winning the division.
Yeah,
this is their second. This is their second national semifinal they've been to. They've actually been to a final, and they fell short of it back in 22, their first year in the league. And then they fell in the conference championship game 2 years ago to the eventual national champion Indy 11. Dan and I were on that call at Flint City as they were playing in that matchup. So they, by all accounts, Minnesota Aurora is the gold standard. We talk about Flint City Bucks all the time and how that organization, how they're run and how they're ran.
Mm-hmm.
Like Minnesota Aurora is like that. I would actually put them a step ahead because what we got yesterday from regard to like the match notes, and you and I, we talk about this all the time about information. Right. We deal with colleges and universities all the time, and they send us their SID, packets of match summaries and all this kind of stuff. I got an 11-page document yesterday that had every possible detail about these teams, right? About the players and about the organization, that you had so much information that you almost at some points felt terrible to keep talking because all you had was information about them. And they're like, well, are these guys homers? Well, yeah, I mean, I'm not a homer, but I mean, when the home team gives me all the information, I'm going to go with it. I mean,
yeah,
but so, and I know you're going to talk about Utah United maybe being an underdog in this. I would argue that Minnesota would be an underdog in this, and not because of their history or because their lack of something, but Utah United is averaging 6 goals a game. Like they average 6 goals. Now, granted, Minnesota have only had 4 goals scored on this entire season. They've played 14 matches now. So whatever 4 divided into 14 is, it's way less than 0.02, whatever you want to call it. Mm-hmm. So they are not allowing a lot of goals. But the reality is that Utah United has a team it's really good. And so I would actually argue that even though they're at home, that Minnesota might be the underdog in this one because of the scoring capabilities of this Utah United side. They have a player who scored. Again, I have to go. I don't know if she scored last night, but had scored 17 goals coming into.
Ouch.
I believe it was Castaigne had scored 17 goals coming into the tournament. She scored a goal. She scored 2 goals on Friday, and so she had 19. It was 19, and then if she scored anything yesterday, they scored 2 goals last night. So I did look at the scoring summary, but 17 goals this season, and now has 19. I go, so that's a player you got to pay attention to. So, but anyways, yeah. So I know you're going to go the underdog. I would actually argue that Minnesota might be the underdog in this one.
And that's fair. And well, it's a clash of styles too. I mean, from what you're talking about, rather like a really strong defense against a team that knows how to pour it on. I think the only reason why I would call them underdogs is simply because Utah United has shown flaws this year. They have lost games, but the other thing that I will say is that they're brand new. I think this is their first year in the USLW playoffs. So that is also, it's rare that you get a team that the first time they get into the postseason, they end up winning a championship. Like sometimes you have to take your lumps right away and then you learn how to get over the hump. And that's really what it is in my mind, because with the history that, that Minnesota has, they've been there, they know how to win. They've come up short. And so maybe that coaching staff and maybe that team is starting to actually put the pieces together and figure out what they need to do to finally get over that hump and get that title, get that ring. And so it's when you're very talented, yes, but learning how to play in the postseason, learning how to play in playoffs, especially when it's elimination games, having a really good defense, having a lot of firepower is really good. But if defensively you have flaws, that might open up things for Minnesota. I feel like we saw a little bit of this too, even with the Detroit City FC game that we did. FC Hammer was a team that, offensively speaking, just dominated this year. But it seemed like they ran out of gas towards the end. And that's what allowed Detroit City FC nearly the opportunity to come back and bring that one even. Now, they had a few unfortunate breaks, a couple of heartbreaking offsides calls that would have put them right back into the driver's seat in that game. But, the question becomes legs. But, it's, again, when it's your first year in the playoffs, you don't normally expect that team to go on to win it all. But now they're just 2 matches away. So I don't know if it's a big-time underdog. I don't know if I would say that there's a steep drop-off between the two, but it might be some element of that.
Yeah, I don't think it's one of those ones where you go like, yeah, this is like
no, it's not. No, obviously.
But again, we see this all the time. We see this all the time in these environments where you've got these moments, where it comes down to moments.
Mm-hmm.
We could argue that in that game, Kings Hammer FC, Detroit City FC, that there were 2 moments in that game that defined the outcome. And I talked about it when in that second half, Detroit City FC was down a goal, and a goal goes in the back of the net, and it's called back, right? And I'm like, that could be a defining moment. In that game, there were at least 3 of them.
Mm-hmm.
You being in an offside position, right? We saw 3 goals go in the back of the net. Only 1 counted.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
Right. And we saw 2 go in the back of the net in the second half alone, where you're like, oh, game equalizer, and they pull it back. And so those are the moments, right? And I could look at the game yesterday between Kings Hammer and Minnesota Aurora and say, hey, there were moments where both teams made critical decisions that could have cost goals, but didn't. And good teams find ways to get out of trouble. Great teams find ways to overcome those obstacles and win soccer games. And so I'm curious how that'll shape up. Seven Castaigne, she did score a goal yesterday, so she has 20 goals now. She did score a goal. So it'll be interesting to see how she matches up against this. I would say this more experienced and anchored Minnesota Aurora side that has a really, really good back line and a very good goalkeeper. Again, only allowing 4 goals in 14 games. It's a really impressive number. We got to move on here. All this coverage again for the USLW will be on Sports Engine Play this weekend. We'll bring that coverage to you. Also have hopefully Goal Zone this weekend. We'll talk about that as well throughout the week. But nonetheless, let's talk U.S. men's national team. Let's talk Gold Cup final. All right. And, there's a question that we had asked here, kind of like, will the U.S. men's national team win a Gold Cup this year? We asked that question, I think, last week. And I even said this. I don't necessarily care if they win the Gold Cup. Like, I don't care. If you told me that a year from now, the men's national team would be in the semifinals, is that more important than winning a Gold Cup? Absolutely it is. Yeah, so trophy. Everyone wants a trophy to put on their mantle. Great. Love it. Fantastic. But in the whole big picture of things, do we think the men's national team will win a World Cup? Absolutely not. But the question becomes, and we ask ourselves, well, what is the furthest that they could go? And I do think that you start talking, the quarterfinals, semifinals. Because if you get to a semifinal, you're playing in a third place match at least.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we could say get to a semifinal, that would be fantastic. But last night in Houston, Texas, U.S. men's national team fall short. They lose 2-1 yesterday. We talk about this as NRG Stadium in Houston. 4th minute, though. Chris Richards opens the scoring. Powerful header. I mean, it barely crosses the goal line, but it goes in. Hits off the underbar. And Sebastian Berhalter was the one that put the ball in, and Chris was able to finish it with his head. 27th minute, Raul Jimenez equalized for Mexico. And we saw his honoring his late friend, Diego Jota, with a celebration. That was pretty cool to watch that happen in real time. 77th minute, Edson Alvarez scored the decisive goal. Now, this goal, controversial in itself, because originally, when the ball went into the back of the net, the flag went up, and they ruled that he was in an offside position. And then after VAR pulled it back, they called it a goal. So this goal was confirmed by VAR. Now, here's where things get really interesting. And it lends to a question, or begs to a question that we have to ask.
So I was going to ask you. This would be my first thing to ask you, but go ahead.
So in the second half of that game, and I don't remember the exact moment it happened.
It was like the 66th minute or something.
Yeah, it was 66. It doesn't say here in our recap, but this moment is one that I think will be something that we talked about with IFAB. I think talked about amongst the soccer community for a while. Mexico's Jorge Sanchez fell in the 18 defensively for Mexico, and his plant foot, or his support arm, literally landed on the ball. And I mean, you can call it what you want, but that's exactly what happened. And no penalty was called. Now, obviously, this would have happened before the second goal scored. So in this situation, if the penalty is called, now it's converted. Men's national team have a lead. It changes the whole, complexion of this game. Was it in fact a penalty? Should it have been called a penalty? Is that the question you're going to ask me, or am
I was gonna be very pointed about this. I was gonna go, Jonathan Turner, you are in that game. You are refereeing that game. This happens. What do you call it? Because in the social spheres and the conversations afterwards, it was, this is egregious, followed by, you dumb Americans, you don't know the rules, followed by, well, this is why no one in America respects this sport, because the rules change every single time you watch it. In this, that, and the other, just back and forth. And I mean, like, legit soccer football minds, people that follow the sport, who were like, that's egregious, it should have been a handball. And then there are other people on, the other side of the coin. And I don't take stock into what fans say, be honest with you. I mean, there isn't a Mexican fan in the world that is going to admit that that's a handball, much like there's no fan of the United States men's national team that's going to look at that picture that you have on the screen right now and go, that's not a handball. Also, it's in the box too, right? So that changes the entire side of the conversation. If this is in the middle of the field, that's a different talk. But 1-1 tie, 66th, I mean, that changes the entire complexion of that game. So that's what I was going to ask you, right? You are in this position. You are at the Gold Cup final. You are on that field refereeing. What do you see from what you know about the situation and everything surrounding it, all the little different factors playing into it? What do you call there?
Okay, so I think it's, before I answer this question, I think it's important to first say that this is very much like the finish the completing the catch, like Calvin Johnson, right? Like, we see it, we're like, what, he didn't complete the catch? No, he completed the catch. No, he didn't. It's not a catch. Like, wait a second. What? Like, this whole thing about completing a catch that doesn't make any sense, right?
Right.
Like, we're like, wait a second. He caught that ball. What are you talking about? Well, no,
Yeah.
because somebody decided one year to add in some language that made it sound like that wasn't a catch, right?
Right.
And so
Right.
everyone got together in a room and they're like, let's make this adjustment, and everyone voted on it. Like, it's not a big deal. And then all of a sudden, it's being applied in real life. And you're like, what the hell is that? Like, what the hell is that?
Right.
The letter of the law. Okay. And so I think it's important, based on the letter of the law, this is not a handball. So if I'm in that position and I am a FIFA referee who's calling a Gold Cup final, and I read the law, a handball is typically called when a player intentionally handles the ball with their hand or arm. However, this situation becomes trickier when it involves the support hand. The support hand. Okay? The ball touches a player's support hand or arm while they are trying to maintain balance, such as when falling or keeping themselves upright. It may not be penalized as a handball. The reason behind this is that the support hand is not being used intentionally to play the ball. If you watch the video of this, clearly falling down, clearly uses his left hand to try to keep himself upright, and in turn happens to be on top of the ball. Therefore, it's like hitting his hand. There's no dispute on there being a hand involved in the situation.
Yeah.
But the issue is that it is his support arm or plant hand, however you want to put it. And because of that, the laws were applied appropriately. Now, I don't agree with it. I think it's shitty. I think it's a shitty change to the law. I think because everyone got in a room one day like, oh, no, the support arm. Well, what do you mean, the support arm? It's like,
yeah, right.
It's like we've changed all these things so that it becomes murkier.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? It's like, well, what do you mean? Like, no, if there's anything that's a handball, that's it. Like, that is the clearest, most quintessential handball I have ever seen in the history of soccer. Now, is it an egregious thing? No, it's not egregious.
No.
But you're like, wait a second, like that? How is that not a handball? And everybody in the world looks at it and goes, that's a handball.
Right.
No, it's not, because we got together and said the support arm is a pass. It's like, it's like, you know what I mean? The perfect example of, if you see, you know it when you see it. That should be the litmus test.
Yeah.
If you know it when you see it.
Mm-hmm.
We all saw it. We know it. It should be it. There should be no way around it.
All right.
But again, because a whole bunch of people got together and we're like, well, we're sliding around in the 18 and my arm can be over here because now, we're trying to all do this with our hands behind our back now, and I fall down and my right hand hits the ground, and that's my support arm. And if it hits the ball hits that's off limits. But the other hand that's waving around like this, that's a handball. That's a handball. Stupid. It's dumb.
Yeah.
And if you're a purist, you hate this.
Yeah.
You hate it. I mean, Pochettino's like, well, if this happened on the other end, it would have been a PK. Okay. That's an emotional response.
Yeah, I think there's an argument there. But
you really think that if Team USA was down there in their penalty box and that happened, that PK would be called?
Yeah, with that environment, with the way
really
CONCACAF is, bring it back to 2015. Bring back to 2015, the way they favored Mexico in that semifinal match.
I
Like
don't, I don't, I don't subscribe to that.
conspiracies around this stuff.
But
But
Nathan, for someone who's been around the game and been
but
around this, there's no subscribership to that, man. It's
just saying.
huh?
Just saying there's a lot of money involved here.
Hold on. What I mean by this, Nathan, is that with that specific play.
No, I know. I hear you. I hear you.
If that play, exact thing as it happened in the other 18, it would not have been called. I guarantee you, it would not have been called. Now, other things where there's where it mirrors, it toes that line. There's no letter of the law. It's like it's all about based on what you think, based on application of the laws. Completely different.
Right.
I don't think VAR even looked at this. Yeah. Right. So if they did, they just confirmed it was fine. Confirmed the call. It wasn't even like this was like a real, like he didn't go to the VAR.
Mm-hmm.
So my perspective on this is that while I agree that there are calls that could be questionable and that they could be applied differently, and is there a human component to this? Absolutely. But I don't believe that this specific call, if this exact same thing happened on the other side of the field, that a PK would have been called. I think the application would have been the same in this environment.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, this is the shit that just drives us nuts. Administrators all get together and go, well, this is, let's change the meaning of a handball. I mean, I don't know of a better meaning than this. I mean, if you took a picture of this image and went back 20 years, every time penalty shot's called, every time,
mm-hmm.
Why is it not being called now? Because they decided to change the application of the law, and they added like a bunch of verbiage that tells you that you can now have your support arm hit the ball, and catch it. Basically, let's catch the ball. I can be like a goalkeeper move. I just didn't have gloves on.
Right. Yeah, and so that allows Mexico to in a lot of ways, I guess, win on a. I mean, they won the game fair and square, but it feels like after that moment, it just feels like it was on a technicality. So they get to run around and they get to celebrate and they get to raise the gold cup and talk as loud as they want to talk. But hey, again. And I kind of agree with the way that you brought this segment in, because you said, does the Gold Cup really matter at the end of the day? No, it doesn't. Like it is, for the longest time, it's been Mexico via the United States. That's what the Gold Cup is. It has always been that way. For me personally, I don't really see it ever going any other way. Like, the truth is, and we talked in length about this, like, the competition in this tournament is not steep. Like, this is set up. The Gold Cup is set up for American and Mexican success. And that's why we've seen these two teams meet up as many times as they've had. That's why we've seen the results and the matchups and the finals and all the exciting moments. It is really set up for their success, because you don't have the European teams. You don't have a lot of the powers that are competing in this tournament. You're not going to see that until we get to the World Cup. So my entire thing was coming away from this, again, do they use what they have set in terms of a foundation with this team? Do the guys that are coming back, do they respond to that, and do they embrace that? That's the question mark to me. My mind is on September. What happened yesterday. Whatever. Allow Mexico to have their celebration. Again, allow them to puff their chests out. Hey, congrats. All right. Like, your A side beat our squad that was missing probably 8 of our top players. They still gave you a run for your money. Like, if that's the extent to which your soccer playing nation is able to go, and if you want to run around and talk about how, we own you now. It's the first time you've beat us consecutively since 2019. Okay, like, enjoy your little sliver of success, enjoy your little, have your little party, whatever you want to do. But we understand exactly what's going on here. The World Cup is coming up, and I hope and I pray that we meet that same side with the additions of the Pulisics and all the other players that opted out of the Gold Cup. I really do, so that we could stomp them, let them know where they belong, and then move on. So that's where we are right now. And so, yeah, again, have your little party, have your little woo, you won a Gold Cup. Hey, congrats. You barely squeaked by our B team. But it is what it is. So where do we go from here? I think the first thing that my takeaway from what happened yesterday is I think with all the hype that we've built up around Diego Luna, he didn't answer the call in the biggest game of that tournament. And so that to me is really discouraging. Do I still think he deserves a spot on the roster? Yeah, I don't think he's a starter per se, but I think he deserves a spot on there. I thought Ajiman looked bad, man. I thought he looked really bad. The hype around him is not there. And I think if anything, I think he played himself out of a spot yesterday. The two players that I'm most impressed by from this United States men's national team is number one, Chris Richards, and number two, Malik Tillman. I thought they both looked really good. I thought that ball yesterday from Berhalter was really good. Now I don't know if he's not a starter by any stretch. If he does get at least a spot on the roster in the World Cup, not going to say I'd be surprised, but I don't think, I think he's deep in the reserves. I don't think he's a starter. But Chris Richards and Malik Tillman both really impressed me. And again, sometimes a push can be a shove, and you talked about it. And when you said it, I didn't really agree with you, right? Because you said that losing for this United States men's national team would almost be more beneficial than winning would. And so I was like, no, that's ridiculous, whatever. And I'm going to back myself up here by saying losing to someone like, let's say, Costa Rica, I don't think that would have been good for the U.S. men's national team. Or losing to, someone else along those lines, a coastal team or whatever. Losing to those sides would not have been good. But when you get into that final and you play in that heated environment and you play against the Mexico side who has now again beat you consecutive times for the first time since 2019, now you have that added pressure of, they're going to take their opportunity to clown you. They're going to take their opportunity to pick you apart, to call you all these names. I mean, we saw the comments online, who's your daddy? Well, okay. All right. Let's back up for a second. Since 2000, Mexico, you're nobody's daddy. All right. Let's get that straight. But the second thing is that a loss like that can really, you talk about getting a team to gel together, and even those guys coming back for the international friendlies coming up in September when we really start to hit the ground rolling going into the World Cup, a push can be a shove a lot of times. And you need a bad loss in a big time situation in order for everyone to kind of get pissed off in a way. And so is that good? I would say it's good. In this situation, to your point, when you said sometimes it's better to lose, that's in that game, in that situation, right? With the controversy over the handball and the bad foul that led to the goal late in that game and all the opportunities that they weren't able to convert on. And again, fighting to a close finish with a group of guys who is not going to be even close to the same group when we talk about the World Cup in 2026 against Mexico's best. It reminds us that we're almost there. Now we need to respond, right? Take that loss, take your lumps, take the feeling that you have in your stomach, which I guarantee all the players on the American side are feeling this right now. And I mean, Tim Ream was interviewed after the game, and you could clearly tell that he was upset. I don't know if Ream's cutting it anymore, by the way, but you need to be able to take that and use it to your advantage. So I think a loss in that scenario, in that game, in that championship final, and the way they lost could be something that spurs this team in a positive direction in the future. Is a 4-0 loss to Switzerland going to spur them in the right direction? No, I think that caused a sense of panic and confusion. But losing 2-1 to that side, that let's face it, they hate us. Yeah, they hate us. And so Mexico. So to lose in that situation, that could be something that actually puts this program going in the right direction. I think that kind of loss could certainly help. You got to grow from it.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot to be learned in a lot of these scenarios. As I said to you before, the roster we saw yesterday will not even be close to the roster that we see in a year. And I don't know. As a coach, I wouldn't look at yesterday as a defining moment one way or the other for players like Diego Luna, Malik Tillman, Agamani. Right? I would. Now, I think that you could argue that I don't think that Agamani had a great, Gold Cup run, especially yesterday. Do I think that he'll be on the roster? No, I just think that there's better players. And so, but again, what we took from yesterday, is there building that you can build from this? I think there's absolutely some things you can build from it. We talked about that already. It's just, again, when I put this into the perspective of any other year, if this is 2022, I'm not having this conversation right now, right? Because we had already finished the World Cup, or maybe 2023. We already finished the World Cup, and we're not talking about 26 yet. It's right. So them not showing up for this World Cup wouldn't have been a big of a deal, but we are. And every chance that you get, every opportunity to play on the U.S. men's national team right now should be first and foremost in anyone's head.
Yeah. Right.
And so like that's the part. And we can talk about A teams and B teams and all the other kind of stuff. I don't really care. What we're going to see is everyone's bringing their A team in 9 months, 10 months. Yeah. Everybody's bringing them. And so if our A team is remotely close to what we saw yesterday on the field, we aren't making it out of group stage.
Right.
Ain't going to happen.
Yeah.
All right. We're
and
under.
That's why, yeah.
So it's again, if we can get all of these players back that didn't play in this tournament and get them back and get them fighting, then we have a fighting chance to get out of group stage, regardless of who's in it, and get in the knockout stages, get out of the knockout rounds. If you can do that, then great. That's our measuring stick. But right now, based on what I'm seeing on the field, we're not getting out of a group stage, and we might even go over. You have to pull that off. And so it's something that we will definitely and most absolutely talk about here in the coming weeks and months as we lead up to the World Cup. You can argue, hey, that the team that put out a good showing during this run and they had a chance to hoist a trophy yesterday, they fell short of that. Will there be a learning curve for them? Absolutely. I think some players who are kind of shocked, but I think this is probably their only chance of actually hoisting a trophy of some kind for their nation, because hoisting a World Cup is, I think you're more likely to get hit by lightning, and that's, you're more likely to get hit by lightning right now than win a World Cup if you're the U.S. men's national team. You could argue that probably for the other 900 nations who are trying to, same thing. I mean, but again, but that wraps up our Monday morning show here. Episode number 114 officially is in the books. And, I would say, like anything else, that continue to roll this way. Nathan, we will get back at this again tomorrow morning. A lot of really cool things we're talking about. A lot of exciting things coming down the pipe here in the coming days, weeks, and months. We'll continue to talk about that. But for Nathan Wengler, I'm Jonathan Turner. You've been watching Inside the Game here on the National Soccer Network. Subscribe, like us, share this with your friends and family, and come back each and every weekday, 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. right here on Inside the Game.